Hi, Mattsquatch here. What I wanted to share with you guys today, everybody out on YouTube, is I wanted to share with you guys my second strange encounter in the woods, which I feel are Bigfoot Sasquatch related. This encounter, these events happened in November of 2013. I don't know the exact dates, but I do know it's November 2013, and it's a few years ago. The reason why 2013 is important is these events happened in Pine Cove, which is a little outskirts of the mountain town of Idyllwild, which is in the Southern California mountains. For those of you out of state not familiar, it's basically the next mountain over from Big Bear. Pretty big mountain range. There's a bunch of lakes up there. It's part of the Pacific Crest Trail. If you go on the BFRO website, you'll see there have been numerous, throughout the years, sightings in the past. And between Big Bear and the mountain that Idyllwild is in, there's a big canyon down below, and that's where Palm Springs is. And even Palm Springs has had strange sightings of strange creatures over the years. It's kind of a weird area down there. But the reason why 2013 is important is that's the same year we had really bad fires up there. If you want to Google or look up in Wikipedia the mountain fire, just mountain fire, and it'll tell you all about it. It happened in July. And I remember we were there for the fire. My father and I, we drove up to the cabin where these events took place, and we could see the DC-10 big giant water dropping planes fly over the cabin. We could see the cabin is kind of on a hillside. The house is kind of built into a hillside, and we could kind of see, all the water dropping helicopters going over and smoke pouring over the side of the mountain. It was a big deal. We went up there and got a bunch of family belongings and photo albums and that kind of stuff in case we ended up losing the place. It was pretty scary. Well, you fast forward a couple months later after the fire. No, our house didn't burn down. We weren't in that much of a danger. It was more or less the backside of the mountain is from where we were. My wife and I were up there in November, and this was before we had a baby. This was before anybody lived up there full time, so this was just a weekend getaway cabin. We went up there and kind of did our thing. We like to barbecue and have a cocktail and sleep. It feels like all we ever do when we go to the cabin is take naps and sleep. So we went for a drive back in the hills down by Lake Hemet, which is a lot lower, and we could see huge swaths of land where the trees were burnt out. And from aerial photographs and coverage on the news, you can just see hundreds and hundreds of acres. I think it was like 26,000 acres burned or something, which is a big giant part of it. So you got to think that there's a lot of animal life and a lot of plants and everything else that got disturbed. Now, fires, for people who don't know, are actually really good for the woods. They're bad for homes and cabins and businesses, but they're good for the woods because they burn out a lot of the undergrowth that chokes off sunlight. The charcoal and all the stuff that gets in the ground is great fertilizer. It helps out a lot of stuff. So anyway, let me get to my encounter. So it was in November. It was pretty chilly out. I remember having the windows cracked and sleeping under a bunch of blankets. I believe it was a Saturday night and early Sunday morning, and I remember laying in bed. We had two dogs with us. We had Sparky, who was a beagle, and Rusty, who was a golden. Sparky's big fat beagle got into everything, was just annoying as hell, would run into people's house, typical giant annoying beagle. Rusty was a golden retriever. He was old at that point, right? 9 or 10, something like that, and he was kind of big, dopey, friendly old golden retriever, and these two dogs got along great and loved to play. So we're in the spare bedroom of the house, which is on the corner of the house going up the hill. Because it's technically 2 stories, but the way it's built into a hill, you can kind of walk down the hill down to the bottom story, and then there's an internal staircase. So in the middle of the night, close to where we were, I started hearing the dogs whimper and whine. They're like, making weird whining, kind of groaning noises, and I'm like, what's going on? And normally these dogs are rambunctious. If one gets up, the other one wants to go up, and they're panting and they're crying and they want to hop on the bed or they got to go pee. They weren't doing that. They were just like on the floor, laying in the dog bed, and they were just kind of quietly like moaning. And I could see in the very, it was dark out, but I could see it was just the motions of the figure. They were just laying flat on the ground, moaning like something's really wrong. And Teresa's passed out. She's fast asleep by this point. And I find it really odd that she slept through all this. But right around the time as I'm wondering what are the dogs doing, I hear a huge boom, a big thump on the side of the house. It like shook the whole house. And my heart starts pounding, and the dogs are quietly whining, and I could hear something like groaning on the outside of the house periodically, and I could hear it kind of go from the back side of the house to around where like the window is, and I could hear like big heavy footsteps, and I could hear scratching. And to be honest, I was actually thinking, is that a goddamn bear? And I realized there's not really many bears in Idyllwild. They don't happen very often. Occasionally one wanders over from big bear. Okay, well, it's not a bear. Mountain lions? There are mountain lions, but I never known them to thump on a house. Maybe scratch on a house and then maybe make some kind of high-pitched cougar type noises, but this didn't seem like that. This seemed like thud, like a bipedal walking, something going on outside. And I remember scared to death, and it took all the courage I had in the world, but I went over to the blinds and lifted a slat up and looked outside, and it was, and I didn't see anything. And it was almost more scary not seeing anything than seeing something, because it was like, what is it? If the cougar, it'd probably be low by the window, but I remember looking outside, and both dogs are just super quiet with the occasional moan, like tail between their legs, and Teresa's like, what is it? What is it? She got up, my wife, and I was like, okay, I don't know what it was, but something was outside. Did you hear that? She's like, I don't know. I think I heard something. And heart was pounding. It took a long time to go back to sleep. It was a very odd moment. Well, the next morning, get up, and I'm kind of eager. It's light outside. I didn't really want to go out there in the dark. I go outside, take a look around the window, and I see like streaks in the dirt, like drag marks, like if you shuffled your feet, but I couldn't make out any footprints. It's pretty hard dirt. And this was in November at the end of a very dry season, so you weren't going to see any footprints anyway. It's not like it was wet out there. But both those dogs, Sparky and Rusty, every time we've ever had them up there, they, as soon as you open a door, they're gone. They run over to the neighbor's house, and they're trying to get into his house, and they're running up and down the streets, and they're sniffing and barking. They go to the neighbor's house and poop in their yard and embarrass us and do everything like that. They're just rambunctious dogs, as much as you can imagine, feeding off of each other. They weren't like that. We let them out in the morning. They both kind of walked down the porch to around where the window was, and their ears were forward, and they were kind of gazing. They were looking up the hill, very intent, and they were staying right by me. They didn't want to go more than a foot. In fact, I thought it was very odd because both dogs squatted and peed right on the concrete, which for the concrete driveway is, which is very odd, because normally they would always go find some dirt or go off to the bushes or something and sniff around. They were not interested. They were not having it at all. They were just like, okay, we peed, and I turn around and they're walking back up the deck, and they were just very like, they smelled something or something was off, or they knew they were being watched. And I just kind of got an odd feeling, like the hair standing up on my neck. And I'm like, okay, let's go inside, and go inside, make our breakfast, kind of do our thing. And then later on, I go back outside, and my wife and I are standing on the front pull-through driveway, which is right next to that side of the house. And everything's very oddly quiet, but I can hear the sound of acorns falling, which there are oak trees up there, and there's a slight rustle of a breeze, but normally you hear birds and squirrels and everything running around. And I gotta say, for being mid-November, it's not really the summer season when people are up there, and November's not really the winter season when people are up there for the snow. So it was really quiet. I think we're probably the only people up there this time of year. I remember there not being really hard. I remember there was one house that maybe had a couple people that was down the street, probably 50 or 60 yards. And I remember taking the dogs for a walk, and I remember them overhearing saying, hey, what was that last night? I don't know. It was some kind of critter walking around. And I remember overhearing that. I never talked to them about it because, to be honest, I was probably trying to keep the dogs out of trouble and not in their business. But I remember, oh yeah, well, I guess they got something walked around their house. But other than that, in this whole community of 30 or 40 houses, there was probably maybe them and maybe one other person who was home. So I find it very odd. So when Teresa and I were out on the pull-through driveway with the dogs looking around a second time, the dogs were also staying very close, not running off, not being normal jackassy dog type stuff. I started to notice that the acorns were falling, and I could hear them, and they're falling right next to me. And I'm like, oh, the wind must be kicking them up, or it's the time of year they come off the tree. I don't know about acorns and oak trees. And I realize above me is a giant cedar tree, and there's not really an oak tree anywhere, I mean, maybe 50, 60 feet away, but I'm not underneath one. And I'm looking up the hill, and both dogs are like transfixed, ears forward, eyes forward, looking up the hill from where the house is, where the road is, and a bunch of other places are. They're just transfixed looking up there. And I'm looking up there, and I could kind of hear some rustling in the trees, like 100 yards up the hill, and I could kind of hear stuff, and all of a sudden I hit more acorns. Like one dunk bounces off my car, one bounces off the driveway, and I'm like, where are these acorns coming from? And those dogs are just transfixed looking up there, and I could kind of see maybe some trees moving around, and it was just very much like something was odd here, hair standing up on my neck. And I look up to see this acorn sailing in at, not falling from a tree, or maybe even at a slight angle as you would expect from if it was falling out of a tree, maybe on a windy day. No, these were coming in at like a 45-degree angle, at like a 50-degree angle, like an arc, like somebody throwing a baseball across a field. They're coming in at me, and I'm like, where are these coming from? And you got to think, an acorn, how far can you throw an acorn? 30, 40 yards? I mean, there's some cover close by, but it was pretty open to quite a ways away. And in the mix of these acorns that are falling, every now and then a little pebble or rock would be bounced off the ground. And both dogs were going up the porch. They wanted back inside. They wanted nothing to do with it. About that time, I think it was midday, Teresa and I were packing up to go home. And it was just kind of an odd, eerie feeling when we were up there. Yeah, and the only thing I can think of, if there was such thing as a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch, then maybe they got displaced by the fires. Maybe they're on a different side of the mountain, because one side of the mountain has a lot of homes and encampments and lakes and trails, and the other side is just mountain. It's just woods, and I think that's the side that burned more or less. So who knows if they were displaced or coming in or migrating. If it was something else, I know cougars don't really throw anything. They don't really make loud, deep guttural noises. They don't really thump on the side of buildings. They don't have bipedal walking. And these dogs, Sparky in particular, he's around coyotes all the time. He sniffs bobcats and mountain lions. When he was around coyotes, he'd be like, oh, look at this other dog. I want to go play with it. And he'd run over to the coyotes, tail wagging. And I'd be like, damn it, no, get back. That thing's going to eat you. So I know it wasn't any normal critter, because especially Sparky, he's up there all the time. He's encountered everything. Was the most foolhardy dog you've ever seen in your life. He would go after anything. He didn't care. So for him to be freaked out, and for Rusty to be freaked out, and for them to just want to go back inside, and to be whimpering and whining, anyway. So that was basically my encounter. We had some weird stuff happen, the thump on the side of the house, the acorns being thrown at us, the dogs whimpering and not wanting to go, the fires earlier that year, starting to get cold out. I don't know. It was just a bizarre thing. I don't know. I haven't experienced really much up there since. I've spent, probably a dozen more times. My dad now lives up there, and he told me that it was late winter, early fall, that he heard something walking around on the roof in the middle of the night, and he heard a huge thud as it jumped off the roof onto the porch. He just assumed it was a bobcat, although he thought it was heavier than a bobcat. And, my dad is kind of old school, and he thinks the whole Bigfoot thing is bullshit anyway, which I can't blame him. One day he's going to go take the trash out, and one's going to be looking at him or something. Yeah, he heard something up there, and in the past I've heard other things, or had weird things in the woods, weird hair on my neck kind of effect, but for the most part it's a pretty peaceful place. Anyway, that's basically the story. There's probably details I'm leaving out. I don't know. It happened, 5 years ago now? 2017, 16, 4 years ago now. So I don't know. I'd like to go back up there and do a full investigation. If you go on the BRFRO website, there are some incidences in the past up there of people camping, I believe at Lake Hemet, which isn't too far. Big Bear's got a bunch of sightings. Palm Desert's got some sightings. It's kind of an area known for having some of this stuff. So I don't know if they stay in the remote areas and move through, or they migrate from mountains, if you want to get into Bigfoot theory. But anyway, it was pretty interesting, and I cannot explain that night. Now, I like to say again, like in my other story where I was hunting, I didn't actually see anything. except for acorns being thrown at a great distance, a loud thud in the middle of the night, and footsteps, and the dogs being freaked out, and low guttural growls. Unless you want to go paranormal, I don't know what else could do all that. There were some other humans up there, but considering that people up there are known to have guns and everything else, I don't think anybody wants to go thumping on the side of somebody's house and trespassing in the middle of the night, especially when you see that you have dogs. And if it was a human, I think my dogs would have just... I know these dogs and I know the way they are, and with the window cracked and the smell, if it was another human, they would either be growling or yipping or wanting to go outside and say hello. They wouldn't have acted in fear if it was humans playing these pranks. So anyway, I hope you liked this video. Hope it's not too long. Please like, please subscribe. You can. I have a Twitter account now, which I'm still new to the social media thing. It's at the real Mattsquatch, my Twitter account, where I put some channel updates and post some videos and things that I find funny on there. Please like, please subscribe to this video. Thank you very much.